Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I do want to thank everybody for coming here today and actually looking out at the room right now and recognizing that it was only a couple of years ago that we put this chamber together. And the thought at the beginning was, oh, should we merge with Edison or should we merge with the Middlesex County? And our goal was to create an East Brunswick Chamber of Commerce and bring into the fold the businesses here and in our surrounding communities. And we thought from the very beginning that we'd be able to do this ourselves. And I think you really do need to give yourselves a round of applause because we did exactly that. This room demonstrates that. Before I agreed to do this, I was asked to do a State of the Township address here, and really thought that, first of all, the State of the Township is usually given at the very beginning of the year, and I didn't really think while you're eating lunch you really wanted to hear about our Parks and Rec department and our IT department and the stuff that I'm required by law to talk about at a State of the Township. What I really wanted to concentrate on is what my role is as mayor, which is to define for the township and have a vision for what the future of the township's going to look like. That's my role, and it's to try to put that vision into actual workable process that gets us there and get in the process people to buy into that vision. That's my role. And of course, with COVID happening the last 2 years, we've all been hit a blow that nobody could have predicted. And so it causes us to have to think a little bit differently in a post-COVID world about what that vision is going to look like, and if the vision that we had from the beginning needs to be altered in any way. Because that actually affects the businesses that are here in East Brunswick in terms of those that are here and those that might want to come here. So that's what I really want to talk about today, which is what East Brunswick's going to look like in a post-COVID world. Before I do that, I do want to announce that with the help of Assemblyman Sterling Stanley, this morning we had a call with the mayor of Rivne, Ukraine, which sits at the northwestern border of Ukraine, right on the border of Poland. Actually, before World War II, it actually was part of Poland. And they are working with us to establish a sister city relationship here in East Brunswick, recognizing that we are the center of New Jersey. I'm sure most of you saw those articles. The statistical center of New Jersey is East Brunswick, actually is the corner of Riders Lane and Milltown Road. So they recognized that. We recognized our importance for the state of New Jersey, and we're going to try to establish a relationship with them so that we could, at least in the middle of this crisis right now, act as a clearinghouse for all those who are contributing to those who are suffering in Ukraine right now, to bring that in, all those supplies to East Brunswick, and then from there get it off to Poland, and from there to Rivne, where it could be distributed throughout the Ukraine where those supplies are needed the most. So we're in the process of working on that, and I think that you should look forward to seeing that announced and be proud that we are doing what we can to help those that are in need. And as soon as this conflict is over and hopefully Ukraine returns to the independent sovereign nation that it was, that we could establish and even further our advance on this sister city relationship in terms of commerce and cultural events and our students, the ways in which we can enhance that relationship. So that was just this morning, and I thought that this would be a great group to announce that to first. Now, I don't want this to sound like a massive data dump, but it's going to sound like a massive data dump, because I think that we live in a world where we depend upon information and data to make decisions. And so that's the information I want to give to you so that you can use that to individually decide where your businesses need to be positioned to best benefit in the future and in this township. What I'd like to concentrate on is the redevelopment, which was something that ushered me and my team into office, the demographics of the township and how that has changed, the economy, and public health, because you'll see as I talk, they all intersect. When it comes to redevelopment, what has really changed? And we've spoken many times about what we're looking to do on Route 18 and taking abandoned and blighted and non-performing properties and turning them around. But in a way, we're a little bit fortunate that we didn't quite build it yet, because as we have come out of the COVID crisis and the pandemic, it has caused us to rethink some of the things that we thought for sure were going to be the needs of the future. And let's start with work schedules. As most of you know, East Brunswick has always been a commuter town. We had 2 bus stations here in East Brunswick. Our plans in redevelopment was to open a 3rd, assuming that if there was more people moving into town, the need would be even greater. But I could tell you from talking to patients day to day in my office, most of them are not going back into the city. They have been working remotely from home. The market has adjusted to that. Many of the people who they worked for have shrunk some of their office space in the city so that there is no intention for workforces to go back in full force. It's more likely going to be a hybrid type of schedule that people will work, where you go in a couple of days a week and most of the time you're going to be home. Well, that's going to change a lot of things for people. I could tell you right now that there was a huge demand in my own personal private office for me to have night hours. People were screaming right and left, oh, why can't I go work? By the time I get home, I can't get into your office until late. I can tell you in the last 2 years, I have had nobody ask for night hours. My last appointment one day a week is 6 o'clock, and nobody has asked me to extend it any longer. Why? Because with hybrid work schedules and virtual working, you can make your doctor's appointments during the day. So people will be here more than they ever have been before. And I don't know, even in a hybrid work schedule, will that dramatically change? There will always be a portion of people that are staying here in town, and it won't be a ghost town during the day. We need to think about that as we plan for the future. We also have the opportunity to have our developers rethink workspace. The goal had always been to try to pack as many people into these apartments as possible so that they could work there and get right on the train and go in, or bus and get into the city. But now if you're going to be working from home, a lot of these plans have had to adjust so that a lot of these apartments are a little bit bigger. You might need to have some office space in the home. This is something that will help our development process be more marketable, because we'll have already had the opportunity to accommodate that, as opposed to having it been built already and now they have to try to retrofit it, which is way more expensive. Parking needs are going to change. The township, like I mentioned earlier, owns 2 parking lots. One of the thoughts in the redevelopment was to build a 3rd parking lot on the southbound side of Route 18. Not so certain we're going to need that any longer, being that at this point we've basically filled 1 deck right now. We've only recently been asked to open up the other deck. Will a hybrid schedule going forward, will more people moving in really require us to build a $28 million parking deck that might not be used? Are there better uses for that property? These things are giving us an opportunity to step back and rethink that redevelopment plan and maybe adjust it in a post-COVID world. What about retail? If people are going to be living and staying home more frequently than they've been before, it's not going to be a ghost town during the day. It's always been the opinion of any developer that's come into our town that they have really no desire to build any retail, because before the pandemic, all you saw were retail stores that were all out for sale, empty space, and they had zero intention. If they could build all apartments, that's what they would have preferred. And it was a big give back for us to ask them to build retail. Well, now they're rethinking that. If you're going to be having a volume of people that are going to be staying here, well, now all of the service industries and the restaurants and makes it a great opportunity for us to rethink the idea of having retail mixed with development communities and providing an opportunity for people to enjoy and benefit from a commercial corridor that sees about 100,000 cars a day. That's one of the busiest commercial corridors in all of New Jersey, is the Route 18 corridor. Now that sort of breathes a little bit of life into the idea that maybe retail will work. And then if it is going to work, what type of retail are we talking about? And if you're talking about what type of retail you're talking about, I'm going to give you the answer. If you take a 40,000 foot view of Route 18, 20 years ago, which was all retail, and look at what the plans are for our future, you should already start to see that it's turning into a entertainment corridor. It's no longer a retail corridor. Rock and Air, Arugas, the plans for the town includes a possibility of an ice rink out on the Route 18 corridor. Tennis. These open the opportunities for people to come into East Brunswick and provide for tournaments and travel teams. And what happens when, I was one of those hockey dads that drove all over the state. Where do you want those places to be? Right off a main highway so that it's easy to find. And when you're there for a weekend, what do you want to do when you're not playing your sport? You're going to look for the restaurants, you're going to need a hotel to stay in, and all of the businesses then benefit as an economic boom to the businesses that are already here. So think entertainment, because that's what our plans are. And it's not novel. All you have to do is look out at the highway and see that that's already started. What would a hockey rink provide, or a rink in general? It's going to provide the opportunity for skating, for curling, which, if you watch the Olympics, has now become a massively popular sport. I would never have thought that, but it is. I know from being a hockey dad what it was like driving all over the state trying to find tournaments. Where do the tournaments usually like to be? In places where it's easy to access. What are we? We're the center of New Jersey. It's very easy to access New Jersey and to access East Brunswick. We need to take advantage. We have 2 tennis centers on either side of Route 18. No reason why we shouldn't be promoting that and getting those type of tournaments and those type of travel teams. We're ideally located. I think that these are the things that, as business people, we need to be thinking about, because that then spells what the future of the township is and where we're going. It benefits hotels, restaurants, service industry, and I think that these are the things and the direction that the township is heading in, and you should know that. When it comes to the demographics of the township, we're also very blessed. We're a town of about 50,000 people, which we know because we just got the census back from 2020, so it's about as new as you can get. And I could tell you that even in a year, that's changed, because most of us have seen with the pandemic that people were getting ridiculous amounts of money for their homes as people came in and offered above asking price for their homes. And so we've seen turnover even in the last year that's not accounted for in the 2020 census, that has forced many people to sell their homes and come in with kids. The schools have seen the effect of that, because as the superintendent and the president of the school board could tell you, our elementary schools are busting at the seams with people who've moved in with young kids. Why do they move here? We have excellent school system. It's a safe township, great community, lots of services, extremely safe, and we're the center of the state. We getting the theme? The other is that we are an extraordinarily culturally diverse township. If you look at our statistics, we're roughly 60% white, 30% Asian, and a mixture of Hispanic and African American. We're basically the country in a nutshell is right here. We're exactly what the entire state and country looks like you have right here in East Brunswick. And they're here all for the same reasons. Everybody moves here for, by and large, the same reasons. Those demographic changes affect the needs of our schools and our schools' infrastructure. It affects how we build the town and the services that we provide. Why are we talking about entertainment? Because that's the things that people that are moving in demand. And so we need, as a township, to respond to those demands in a way that is fair and equitable and provides for a wealth of opportunities and reasons for people to stay here. We also have a lot of new businesses that have moved into East Brunswick. Despite the pandemic, we were averaging about 100 new businesses per year. That really hadn't materially changed during the pandemic. And what are those businesses? They're not one sector. We have businesses in restaurants, we have businesses in entertainment, we have businesses in finance and professionals. That hasn't changed. So clearly, even in the most desperate of economic times, people have still found East Brunswick to be a community that they want to move to and a community that they want to open a business. And that, to me, speaks very strongly about the survival of this organization, because I see every reason for this group to continue to grow and become and remain a vital component of our plans, and the interaction that we have with the chamber is critical to us providing the best services. If you look at the emblem of the township, it talks about community, it talks about our schools, but it also talks about commerce, which means that your businesses in town are just as important as everybody else, and we know that. I want to talk a little bit about the economy in East Brunswick. We have seen a massive increase in service sector jobs that have moved into East Brunswick, and many of that has been related to COVID. We, like everybody else in the state and the country, have had our issues. Hiring has become a big problem. We have a very difficult time in order to find people to fill a lot of jobs, as many of you do, and that has two probably main reasons for that. One is that the demand for higher wages has gone up, and that's often very difficult for starting businesses to accommodate. And we also have a massive decrease in immigration over the last several years, which used to be a pool of people upon which you could depend to bring in starting workers. Well, that immigration in this country is at its lowest that it's been in decades, and that is not necessarily a good thing. We need to work on that. But the bottom line, though, is it does affect our ability to hire people for starting and entry-level positions. We're all dealing with inflation, as most of you know, whether it's your costs of goods and services, energy, food, services. Those are issues that are affecting East Brunswick no different than anybody else. But I'm happy to announce that despite all of that, and the town has those issues that we have to deal with as well, but taxes for this coming year, based on the levies we have seen coming in from our expected school levy, county levy, and town levy, this should be the first time in decades, probably almost ever, that East Brunswick residents and businesses will see a tax decrease. Come on, that's a good thing, isn't it? Don't want to be trying to sound too political here, but in the 6 years that I've been mayor, the average tax increase was 3.9%. In the 15 years before I became mayor, it was 4.8%. I think that tells you something about the ability of me and my team of professionals and our council to actually take control of the things that matter to most of residents and the businesses here in the township, and we don't intend to take our foot off the gas. The township is in an extraordinarily fortunate position when it comes to our economic outlook. I give a lot of praise to that, again, to our professionals. Most of you were introduced before. Angel Albanese here is our township CFO, took over for Lou Neely. Lou who? Forgot who that was, right? Because the reality is that we stand at a point in time where the township has a 99% collection ratio on taxes. We have extraordinarily low debt, about 0.508% township debt, which makes us one of the lowest debt ratios of all 600 towns in the entire state of New Jersey. We have a clear vision for what it is that we want to do with redevelopment, and don't think for 1 minute that the rating agencies don't ask us those questions when they determine what our bond rating is going to be. They want to know all of that information because that's what they use to calculate the risk of investing in this township. There is a reason that we have a AA+ bond rating, and that is because of the work that we do so hard to try to make sure that all of those things provide to a rating agency that doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. They really just look at financial data. That's all they care about. And that rating is based on their independent review of the data that we give them, and that's about as high a bond rating as any town can get. And as we come out of the pandemic, the last area that I wanted to touch upon is public health, because I think that all of these things interact, and there's a lot of issues that we're going to have to deal with coming out of this pandemic. Number one is the massive mental health issues that have affected not only our children, although that's critical with the 2 years that they've had to deal with virtual learning, but many adults have had to deal with these factors as well, as it affected their jobs, it affected their ability to provide for the income they need. It has been a tremendous hardship. We in the township are working our hardest to work with our health advisory committee, to work with our professionals in town, to and our schools, to make sure that we provide as many opportunities and as many programs as possible to try to deal with this issue, which is really just critical to us getting past the pandemic. And I want to truly shout out for all of those who are working on this issue, because many times mental health tends to get a second or back seat compared to the regular medical care, and it really needs to come out and get the attention that it deserves, and we intend to do that. I've also seen in the last 2 years an erosion in our faith in public health officials and agencies to be accepted, their information and the science to be accepted by communities, and that unfortunately has been because we've taken a virus and made it political where it never belonged. We need to work hard to try to regain the trust of individuals so that we can rely on the people whose sole purpose is to make sure that they provide sound medical guidance and advice to us, and actionable advice that we can live on, and depend upon those people to do that. I think we need to work hard to restore that, and that's a big issue. The other issue that I think is critical, especially that I look out at Cranberry Road, which has been for many decades now a massive and major medical corridor. There are tons of medical practices and allied medical practices that are all here lined up right in East Brunswick, taking advantage again of our position in the state, but being so close to some of the neighborhood hospitals, it's really allowed us to build that corridor. But the problem is that there is a looming physician shortage in the next decade. I could tell you with absolute certainty that pay for physicians in almost any other state is much higher than it is in New Jersey. And so as physicians leave residency training, there is almost nothing that will keep them in New Jersey unless they have family or relatives or a spouse that already has a job here, and they really just can't leave, because the opportunities to leave New Jersey are just so much greater than it is to stay here. And I think that that's only gotten worse with the pandemic, because if you're not bringing new people in, a lot of the older physicians have made a thought that they might stay and practice a little bit longer, but with the pandemic, they packed it in and they've retired earlier than they thought. They're trying to get an appointment with a primary care doctor right now in East Brunswick. It's probably a 6 to 9 month wait for a new visit. It's just impossible. Many of them have either left practice or reduced, not seeing new patients, and many of them have gone into concierge medicine, where they get a fee for maybe 10% of their patients that'll actually be willing to pay $2,000 a year, and the rest of them they're just going to let go. And now all the rest of the doctors are now trying to handle the volume of people that have left all those practices, and so it's now impossible. If you're a specialist, there's almost no way that New Jersey is going to offer you a salary that's competitive with the South or the West or the Midwest. Absolutely not. They all leave. So it's a looming problem that will not be made up for by physician extenders. There's no nurse practitioner or PA. While they're helpful, they will not make up for the exodus of physician practices. We need to start working on that, not only because it's the right thing to do and New Jersey has a massive need for health care, but we in East Brunswick have a massive healthcare corridor. We don't want to lose what we've established. So I think those are things that are important to us here in East Brunswick. And there are many, many ways that we could address that. So in conclusion, I think that we as a township have an extraordinarily huge opportunity to take advantage of what we've been blessed with. Our location, the fact that we've always committed to good schools. It's not new that we did that. That's something we've been doing for decades. People have known that for a long time. The safety of our township, that's the reason people have moved here. The fact that it's easy to get to anywhere in the state from here, that's a reason people move here. Our diversity has become a huge reason that people move here. And so I think from this vantage point of what my job is as mayor, to get all of that together and try to then put in a vision that everybody could buy into to what the future is. All of those things that I spoke to you about today affect our plans for redevelopment. They affect our economy. They affect our plans for how we're going to deal with infrastructure. And they are massively effective in terms of the cultural opportunities that we provide to people that move here. So I'm definitely bullish on East Brunswick. You're not going to find a bigger supporter of this township. And I'm just hoping that we continue on this path and that we can do what we can to make sure that we not only provide for our residents, but to this crowd, to the businesses that are here and the ones that are here to come. And I thank each and every one of you for listening to me, and I thank you for being part of this really tremendous community. So give it up for yourselves.